Shalom, ladies and gentlemen. This is Rabbi Yehuda Glick from Jerusalem. We are 3 days before the beginning of the holiday of Passover. We will be speaking today and trying to organize things about what is this holiday called? What's its name? Passover, Pesach, holiday of Mazzot. Let's dive in to the book. I'm inviting you to dive in with me to the book, the Bible, and let's read and make order. What is this holiday? Is it Passover? Is it Pesach? Is it the holiday of Mazzot? Join me. We're going in right now. And I want to invite you to begin with the book of Leviticus, Vayikra, chapter 23. Vayikra, chapter 23, is the chapter in the Bible that deals with all the holidays. In Vayikra 23, we have a list of all the holidays, and we will look and see what is the name of this holiday. I am reading in the book of Vayikra, the book of Leviticus. By the way, I don't know why they call it Leviticus. The entire book barely mentions the Levites. It actually should be called the book of priests, of Kohanim. That's what it's called in Hebrew, Torah Kohanim. But we are going into Leviticus 23. Join me. Chapter 23 in the book of Leviticus. It begins at the beginning with the talking about the Shabbat. But immediately, the first holiday mentioned is in verse 4. Verse 4. These are the Lord's appointed, the holy occasions. Ele moadei Adonai nikra'ei kodesh. Asher tikra'u otam b'moadam, which you should designate in their appointed time. B'chodesh rishon, in the first month, on the 14th day of the month in the afternoon, you shall sacrifice the Passover offering to the Lord. Bein ha'arbaim Pesach l'Adonai. In the afternoon is Pesach. Uva chamisha asar yom, and on the 15th day, Chag hamatzot ladonai shivat yamim matzot ochelo. So, what is this holiday? On the 14th day of Nisan, we have a holiday called Pesach, Passover, Pesach. On the 15th day of Nisan, we have a holiday called Chag hamatzot. Shalom, Andrew from Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. We love you, Malaysia. Blessings from Jerusalem to Malaysia. So on the 14th day of the month of Nisan, which this year will be on Wednesday, is Pesach. On the 15th day, Shalom, Beverly from Texas. God bless Texas. On the 15th day is the holiday of Mazzot. And here we have to find out and try to figure out. And if we read, join me, also in the book of Numbers, it mentions the same division between these two holidays. In Numbers, book of Bamidbar, chapter 28, we have the offerings brought to the temple on each one of the holidays. And in chapter 28, in verse 16, Uva chodesh harishon, in the first month, be'arba'asar yom lachodesh, on the 14th day, Passover to God. Pesach l'Adonai. Shalom from Poland. Jeko, JJ, we love you. On the 15th day, Chag, there is a holiday. Shiv'at yamim matzot yachal. 7 days you eat matzot. So on the 14th day we have Pesach. On the 15th day we have Chag HaMatzot, the holiday of matzot. But let's, in order to, the things are not as simple as they may think, because if we look and try to find out why do we eat matzah? Why do we eat matzah on the holiday of Passover, on Mazzot? It's very interesting. We can go back to chapter 12. Many of you well know, why do we eat matzah on Passover? So many of you will probably recall the verse in Exodus 12, as it says, God told the people of Israel to go out of Egypt. Shalom to Violeta Gomban. If we go into chapter 12 of the book of Exodus, it sort of explains why do we eat matzah. And I'm reading to that chapter 12 in Exodus, verse 39. Vayofu et habatzek, and they baked the dough. Asher hotziu mi Mitzrayim, which they took out of Egypt. Ugot matzot kilo chametz. They were matzah and not chametz. Why? Ki gorshu mi Mitzrayim. They were driven out of Egypt, and they lo yachlu hitmameh. They could not tarry. They could not be delayed, and therefore we eat matzah because we had to run away. We were driven out of Egypt, and we didn't have time to prepare a chametz. But there's a problem with that story. Why is there a problem? Because in the beginning of chapter 12, Shalom to Sonia, in the beginning of chapter 12, already in verse 8, and we're talking about a portion that was mentioned on the beginning, we're talking about in chapter 12, verse 2, this month shall be for you the head of the month. And God says on the 10th, in verse 3, on the 10th of this month, you take a lamb per family. And in verse 6, you will keep it for inspection until the 14th day. And God already says in verse 8, and you will eat the meat that night, roasted over the fire with matzah. So how can it be? How can we say that the eating of matzah is because we were driven out of Egypt and we didn't have time, if already before the commandment and before the Exodus, God had already told us we are to eat the offering, the Passover or the Paschalny offering with matzah. So how can you say that the offering is eaten with matzah on the because we didn't have time to prepare the matzah already? When God already told us to do it, He told us to do it, and He told us not to eat matzah. So that's a question, and we have to understand what is the different idea of this holiday. What's it called? Whether it's called holiday of Pesach or is it called the holiday of Mazzot? In order to get a little more difficult, join me for a second in the book of Deuteronomy, the book of Dvarim, chapter 16. In Deuteronomy chapter 16 is the discussion of all the different holidays as Shalom, Gadol Elohai from Michigan. Shalom, we love you, and warm regards to Pastor Begley. Shalom, Rivka. So we join me in the book of Deuteronomy chapter 16. It says, keep the month of Aviv, of the spring, and make the Passover offering for your Lord, your God, in the month of the spring, and you make a Passover. And what does it say about the Passover offering? In verse 3, in chapter 16 of Deuteronomy, Lo tochal alav chametz, don't eat chametz, ki pechipazon yatzata mimitzrayim, because you went out of Egypt when you were very, very rushing, you were hasting. And what does it say? You cannot prepare, in verse 5, you should not sacrifice the offering in your city. You have to go to Jerusalem. Verse 6, except for the place which the Lord your God has chosen. There you bring the offering of the Pesach, and there you cook it and eat it. 6 days you eat matzah, and on the 7th day you have a godly celebration. So here we're talking about a celebration, not on the first day, not on the second day, on the 7th day. In order to see a little more difficult, let's go for a second to the book of Exodus, not to chapter 12 we saw before, but rather to chapter 23. In chapter 23, in the book of Exodus, chapter 23, in verse 14, it says, 3 times you shall celebrate in the year. On the Chag HaMatzot, the holiday of Matzot, you keep for 7 days. And then it mentions, at the end, you have to preserve this offering and not eat it with chametz, with unleavened bread. And the same portion appears also in the book of Exodus, in chapter 34. In chapter 34, you'll find a repetition of the exact same thing. You'll find it in chapter 34. One second, let me open chapter 34. One second. Chapter 34. It specifically mentions the offering of the Pesach, and it mentions specifically the idea of Chag HaMatzot. Follow me. I am right now in chapter 34 in the book of Exodus. We are in verse, one second. Where is it? Excuse me. Chapter 34. One second. I opened chapter 33. Okay, chapter 34. I am in chapter 34, and here we are, verse 18. Et Chag HaMatzot, the festival of Matzah, Tishmor, verse 18 in chapter 34 in the book of Exodus. Shivat Yamim Tochal Matzot, 7 days you eat Matzot, because it's the beginning, it's the month of the spring, and that month you got out of Egypt. Further on, later on, it says in verse 23, 3 times a year you have to go see God, you're the God of Israel. And then it says, and lo tishchat al chametz in verse 25. Do not offer the offering of the Passover with chametz, with unleavened bread, and don't leave over the Pesach offering till the morning. So what do we see here? We actually have 2 different celebrations. 2 different celebrations. One holiday is called Pesach, and it is on the 14th of the month of Nisan. This year we will celebrate on the 14th, which means on Wednesday this week. But this is a very special holiday. It's a holiday of the offering of the Pesach, meaning you celebrate it only from the 14th in the afternoon. This holiday goes on all the way to the middle of the night of the 14th night. On this offering, we eat the Pesach. What is the Pesach? It's the offering we ate in Egypt when we were preparing ourselves to be free people. God said, get ready. Here we eat matzah, not because we didn't have time to bake, but we eat matzah as a symbol of the food that we ate as poor people, as slaves in Egypt. When you're a slave, you don't eat bread. You get matzah. They give you the thing that lasts for a longer time, the thing that will holds in your stomach for a longer time. So we eat the matzah, and we eat it together with the offering of the Pesach, and that is on the holiday called Pesach, which is on the 14th day of Nisan. And there we are remembering that we were slaves, and we recognized God. We announced that God is taking us out of Egypt. Then we have 7 days where we celebrate the redemption, that God redeemed us. Then we eat the matzah. We eat the matzah remembering the exodus from Egypt. Then we eat the matzah because we didn't have time to prepare our bread. Now, these 2 holidays, one is on the 14th day of Nisan. We remember being slaves, and we remember that we chose to be free. We chose to be worshipers as servants of God. That's on the 14th. On the 15th, we begin the holiday, like all the other holidays, where we celebrate that God took us out of Egypt. And we were not going to forget that. And we're not going to forget. So the holiday of Pesach actually has 2 sides in it. One side is the evening, the first evening, and we celebrate that here. We celebrate that and now in our days. Unfortunately, we don't have a temple. We celebrate it in the Seder. We have a table of Passover. That's what we celebrated on the holiday of Mazzot, which is 7 days. That we celebrate the redemption, that God redeemed us. Now we have to understand the beauty of Pesach. The beauty of our holiday that we're going to be beginning right now is that it has 2 ways. God would not redeem us if we wouldn't get up and announce that we want to be His servants. There were those that didn't go out of Egypt. There were those that remained behind. The only way to be redeemed, nobody can redeem somebody if he doesn't understand the idea of being redeemed. A person you can't force somebody not to be a slave. You cannot force somebody not to be a slave. In order for a person to be redeemed, he has to first put himself into a mentality of being redeemed. When you put yourself in a mentality of being redeemed, only then, when God redeems you, you can be redeemed. Because redemption, being a free person, is not only a matter of where you are, it's a matter of a mentality of who you are. It's a matter of a mentality of how you refer to yourself. Shalom from Nepal. Wow, we have people here today from Malaysia, from Texas, from Nepal, coming from all over the world. It's just wonderful to watch. Well, thank you. I love you all. Ladies and gentlemen, the idea of being free people begins from inside. Are we ready to be servants of God? Are you ready to be servants of God? It doesn't matter where you are, whether you're in Nepal, in Malaysia, in Poland. Are you ready to be servants of God? If you're ready to be a servant of God, then God can redeem you. But if you're not, if you're still a slave, and it doesn't matter of what, if you're still a slave, Shalom Stockholm, Shalom Elsie London from Stockholm. It depends. In order to be a free person, you have to go through the 14th. You have to bring the offering and announcing to God, here I am. I want to be a free person. And once you do that, Shalom Rich, MC Judah Fire Bull, we love you, Shalom. And if you want to be a free person, it begins from inside. Nobody can force you. Shalom, Shalom, Stockholm in the house. We're all in our house. And that's the beauty of Passover. We want to mention right now. The beauty of Passover, and here listen carefully, though we are alone in our house, we're alone and everyone is in his own house. Everyone's in his own, we're sort of alone. But just as it was when we came out of Egypt, everybody was alone in his family, but we were united as one. And now is the time. Now is the time where God said to Solomon in Kings 1, chapter 8, he says, I heard your prayer from heaven. I'm in heaven, but my throne is in Jerusalem. I heard your prayer, and God says, and I will listen to the prayers of everybody. We will all be united. We'll all be united, even though everyone's in his own house. Every one of us, somebody's in his home in Stockholm. Somebody's in his home in Malaysia. Somebody's in his home in Madrid. Somebody's in his home in Texas. Every one of us were sort of separate. But here, look at the beauty that God has did. He created, even before he created the corona, he created the internet. We can all be separate and be united. And that's the beauty this year, for the first time. We're going to be able to understand. Shalom from Canada, Angela, you're a real angel. And shalom, Martin Edwards from Texas as well. And shalom, Claudia Gittenberg. Listen, every one of us is separate. Every one of us, I'm here in Jerusalem. And Jerusalem has the spirit and the ability to unite us all, even though we're all separate in our home house. We're in our own kitchen. We're cleaning for Passover. We're alone. We can't meet our grandparents. We can't go outside to work. Every one of us is alone in his house, but we are not alone. We are going to remember the elderly. We're going to remember the orphan and the widow. We're going to remember the single. I strongly recommend, this year especially, take some time. Call somebody that's alone. Call somebody that you haven't spoken to. Try to inquire how he's feeling, how she's doing. Call an elderly single person. Find out, inquire, invite, or order some food for them from the close by grocery. That's what we're doing this year on Passover. And thank you so much for connecting this wonderful idea of Pesach and Chag Matzot. In order to celebrate the holiday of freedom, in order to celebrate the holiday of Matzot, of redemption, you have to first redeem yourself. You have to first get up and say, here I am, I want to be a servant of God. Hineni, Hineni. And that's what the people of Israel did on the 14th. On the 14th, they took it already on the 10th, as it says in Exodus 12. They already took it on the 10th. This year, 10th was yesterday, on Shabbat. On the 10th, they already took the lamb. They tied it to their bed. They said to the people of Egypt, we are getting ready to be free people. Only then can God redeem people. But also then you have to remember that you cannot be redeemed by yourself. Only God has to be able to redeem you. And therefore, the idea of this holiday, we're joining together. The fact that we decide to be friends, we decide to be free. Shalom, Angela Larabi from Canada. We have many angels here today. We choose to be free people. We choose to be redeemed, to be servants of God, to be hinenis of God, to say, God, here I am, we are ready. And then God will redeem us. So yes, this year also, as I said, every one of us is alone in his house, everyone in his own country, in Canada or in Sweden, in Malaysia or in Nepal, in Indonesia or in Iran. We are all together. Every one of us is alone, but we're all united together, and we're all together going to announce to God, we want to be your servants. We are ready to be your servants. And then, by no doubt at all, God will redeem us. God will turn us to be free people, because the very first step is to understand that from inside we want to be free people, and then God can redeem us. And God, He is so great. So shalom from Jerusalem. I'm welcoming you and inviting you. Visit our Facebook page, visit our YouTube channel, Shalom Jerusalem Foundation. Visit our website, shalomjerusalem.org. And we love you all. Shalom from Jerusalem. Shalom from Jerusalem and Chag Sameach. We're going to be back here. Before Pesach, we still have Monday and Tuesday. We'll be back. Shalom. We love you. Shalom from Jerusalem.